Let's bring in the foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan now. Greg, as this debate about whether Australia resumes funding for the UN relief agency in Gaza at another level, we're seeing this rift between Joe Biden and Netanyahu really flare up again as to the very different approaches they want to see in Gaza.
Yeah, so Kieran, I think Israel is losing the propaganda war here, but the realities don't correspond to what the perceived wisdom is. I mean, I don't understand why we fund UNRWA at all. UNRWA is full of Hamas activists, and you know, Israel and Gaza are surrounded by hundreds of millions of Arabs, including some of the richest states in the world, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf oil states. If they can't stump up the couple of $100 million that UNRWA needs, why are Australian taxpayers being required to do this? Why are we issuing visas to people from a country with a very radicalised Islamic tradition? It all seems a bit weird to me. Biden has been a very strong supporter of Israel, but he's under a lot of pressure from the left wing of his own party at the moment. So he's saying to the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, you can't go into Rafah. Now, what Biden has done there is relieve pressure on Hamas for a ceasefire. Israel is offering a ceasefire today. If Hamas would release a group of hostages, doesn't even have to release all the hostages, it can have a 6-week ceasefire tomorrow. But Hamas has made the tactical calculation that it can get a lot more out of a ceasefire because of the American and international pressure coming on Israel. And so Hamas is saying, we won't have a ceasefire unless Israel withdraws from Gaza entirely and permanently. That certainly can't happen. And I don't think that Netanyahu can possibly allow Hamas to continue to rule in Rafah. At the same time, of course, there's an overwhelming need to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza. But one thing that strikes me as weird is why nobody puts the moral responsibility for this continuing conflict on the shoulders of Hamas. They could solve it tomorrow by releasing the hostages. They could end all the suffering for the people in Gaza in a day by releasing the hostages, or even releasing half the hostages.
Yeah, indeed. And that was their atrocities that started this on October 7. Let's look at the ongoing debate around TikTok in the United States. What do you make of where that debate's at, as Donald Trump looks like he'd flagged support for a ban when President now not so sure about it? He describes Facebook as the enemy of the people, and he doesn't want to see it get any bigger.
Yeah, so Trump changes his mind, you know, all the time. I think I've got to admire Trump loyalists, because you've got to be very, very flexible. You've got to be all against TikTok when he's president, then all in favour of TikTok when it doesn't suit him, and then he'll change his mind again, sure as eggs, and they'll all switch back. But look, TikTok is a very troublesome app. The Chinese have created this rod for their own back. They have a law which says every single company, Chinese-owned, has to cooperate with the national security agencies. TikTok collects an enormous amount of data about people in the West, and it's owned, you know, it's owned by a Chinese company. At the same time, a lot of analysts have told me that TikTok slants the news in the way that the Chinese government wants. A lot of people under the age of 30, Kieran, they should be watching your program, but they're playing with TikTok, and they're actually getting their news content from TikTok. Now, I'm all in favour of freedom of speech, and I don't want government, you know, determining what views we can hear. But even less than I want the Australian government to determine that, I want the Chinese government to determine that. So the US legislation in the House of Representatives says TikTok can either, the Chinese company that owns it can sell it to someone else so it doesn't suffer any financial loss, or it will be banned from American apps. Now, it's not clear that this legislation, although it has overwhelming bipartisan support in the House of Representatives, will get support in the Senate. President Biden has said if it passes Congress, he'll sign the legislation. Trump, I guess, would try to prevent the senators from passing it. I think that might be hard for him now, just because he's out of sorts with Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, and he thinks TikTok is a competitor to them.
Yeah. Indeed. And as you say, might change his mind again next week. Greg, appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kieran.